Hello there. Welcome once again to Talk and Fight and another episode featuring Christian from the Friday night panel on the Olympics, particularly boxing at the Olympics coming this July to Tokyo. And what have you found out for us today?
Well, Graham, as you know, I get up in the mornings, and what I normally do is I get my coffee and I start running through the day's headlines, trying to find us, newsworthy stories about amateur boxing and specifically Olympic boxing from around the world. I haven't done any of that this morning. I spent my whole morning watching boxing because, as you know, the European qualifiers have resumed for the Olympics as of this morning. And with that early or afternoon session in Paris for us starting about 8 a.m. this morning. So I have been glued to my TV set and I had my tablet next to me running Ring B all morning. So I've been watching boxing now. I've got a few notes on a few of the matches that have taken place, but it is, keep in mind that this is still early days for this tournament, so to speak. We're still in that round of 16 kind of space here. And I'm only one man, so I can only cover one of these rings at a time. So we're just taking a look at a couple of the fights that have gone on so far that were happening in Ring A, both in the afternoon session and the first part of the evening session, which is still currently going on. So we're going to have a quick little episode today because I want to get back to watching what's going on the rest of this afternoon session for us here. But starting off, you're looking at the women's middleweights. Price. We're back. There we go. Price out of Great Britain and Frances Michel started us off in the women's middleweight. Now, Price came out of the gate a little slow, possibly just trying to figure out her opponent, but we definitely started making up ground in the second. Once we got to the second round, sending Michelle to the canvas at one point in time there. Once we made it into the third round, Price was clearly in control. And as we saw Michelle start to run out of steam. Now, this wasn't the most exciting match that we've seen all day, but it was enough for Price to get the job done, winning this card on a unanimous decision. So she's going to be moving on to the next round. Also in the middleweight category, we saw Ukraine's Anastasia Chernikolenko against Lithuania's Gabriel Stonkute. Now, right out of the hop, 3 or 4 crisp right jabs from the Ukrainian to start this whole match up and running. There was no real interest in leaving this one up to the judges, but I mean that's ultimately where it did land at the end of the day. Stonkute was working mostly on body shots here and hoping to really just tire her out, but Chernikolenko at the end of the day won this on a unanimous decision. Again, not the most exciting, not the most technical of fights, but it got the job done. And we're still early days on this one here. Same, very similar kind of match that we saw from Aoife O'Rourke out of Ireland beating Victoria Kebekova out of Belarus. Once again, on a unanimous decision. We're looking at just points here. We saw a medium kind of paced bout with this one here, with the Irish woman controlling the pace for at least 2 out of 3 of those rounds, but all 3 eventually being scored in her favor. Moving over to the men's welterweights, though, this is where things start to get a bit interesting here. This is where we saw Pat McCormick out of Great Britain against Monaco's McAuliffe. So this was a difficult situation for McAuliffe, having drawn someone like McCormick this early in a tournament, because he is the top seed at this point in time. So at the end of the day, McCormick, he covered this for the first 2 rounds easily. And once we got into the third, we started to see McAuliffe starting to run out of steam. And the end result in that he started turning his back. What did this turn into? This turned into not 1, not 2, but 3 standing 8 counts for McAuliffe in the third round, with eventually the ref just waving this one off after 3 standing 8s in the third. So that sees McCormick, who again is the tournament number 1 seed, just kind of going through the gears on this contest. But he's obviously going to have some tougher opponents moving ahead on this one. So maybe it's decent that he was able to pace himself a bit for this one. Still sticking in the category here, we saw Bosnia-Herzegovina's Adam Fedihovic lost to Georgia's Eskerkan Madiev. So this one, I mean, easily we scored 2 rounds for for the Georgian on this one, with eventually a unanimous decision going for Madiev out of Georgia. But at least 2 out of 3 rounds went to him here, with Fedohovich really just running out of steam only by the time we got down to the 3rd round. And that was evident. And when you saw him, he was just hanging on to these clinches. You saw him arms out, no, I'm not holding, well, easily throwing all of his weight onto his opponent, hoping for just a moment's respite here. So what really did the trick in this one, this was an early investment in body shots, was what really turned the tide on this one. So right off the hop in the early part of the 1st round here, Madiev just really worked Fedohovich's body, and it took its toll. And you could see that. You could see the way Fedohovich was starting to slump once we got into that 3rd round. And again, unanimous decision, eventually going to the Georgian on that one. We saw Ireland's Aiden Walsh winning in a split decision over France's Wahid Hambli. Now, Walsh took this one on 4 out of 5 of the cards. Walsh kept himself out of harm's way for the most part, with Hambli having a bit of trouble figuring out the Irishman through the first 2 rounds. Walsh managed to get that 3rd and final round, effectively keeping Hambli at arm's reach for most of this one. And at no point in time did we really see Walsh in too much trouble. I mean, Hambli's not a bad fighter. He did land a few. He's quick, but for the most part, you saw Walsh keep his guard fairly high, and Hambli just had a really hard time kind of slipping through there. So it was a technical fight, but I don't know if we really saw the best of what we could have seen out of either one of these boxers. But we're going to be seeing a little bit more of Aiden Walsh as he moves on in this category. In the men's light heavyweight, we saw Romania's Paul-Andre Aradui against a friend of the show here, Great Britain's Ben Whittaker. Okay, so our boy Ben here did win this one on a split decision. So he came out with Whittaker came out with a series of stiff lefts early on, and in the 1st round actually managed to land triple jabs several times, actually. So the Romanian having a bit of a hard time keeping his guard up at the end of the day here. Early in the 2nd round, Whittaker did lose his mouthpiece, so there was a short stoppage there. Now, if you do that too many times, or that happens a couple of times, you can lose points here from the refs, as sometimes a desperate fighter will, spit out his mouthpiece in an attempt to slow things down, to get that the ref to stop the match, to get a bit of a breather, or to get himself off the ropes. Now, this didn't happen here, as Whittaker was clearly on the offensive at this point in time and had the Romanian back into the ropes when he did lose his mouthpiece. So no harm, no foul on that one. And just to even things out, Aradui lost his mouthpiece midway through the 3rd, just to, so he got his own little stoppage there. But Ben Whittaker is through to the quarterfinal stage for this particular one, in what's a really varied, as far as style and ability, in my personal opinion goes, weight category. And we'll talk about that in just a quick second here. Staying again in the same category, we saw Sweden's Laroden Nua win in a unanimous decision over Estonia's Steven Az. Now, this fight is one of the ones that, actually this one and the next one, both show kind of this vast difference that we see. Now, these guys, we saw a lot of standing around, trading, headhunting throughout this contest. It was a much slower and less technical bout. With these fighters, both willing to shrug off shots, and making little effort to avoid being hit in order to land some of their own. So this is a little different than what we had seen in the fight forward, in Whittaker's fight. Now, we saw something very similar, Ireland's Emmett Brennan winning against Sweden's Jukka Smajli in a unanimous decision. Brennan finds his range early on. Neither one of them looking like they wanted to leave this in the hands of the judges. Brennan basically spent most of this match trying to close the gap in between the two of them, with Smajli trying to do his best to keep the Irishman at arm's length. So these were a completely different fighting style from what we're seeing from people like Ben Whittaker, who is the top seed in his category here for a reason. And so we see a lot more trading, a lot more stationary fighting. Whereas you look at someone like Ben, and he's got a very slick defensive style that he plays with here, and you see a lot of very effective bobbing and weaving. Like throughout the course of the Whittaker fight. Throughout the course of the Whittaker fight, Aradui just had a really hard time at landing anything, because almost everything that he threw at Whittaker, he would duck, he would bob, he would weave, and so he was maybe landing 1 out of every 3 shots that he was throwing. as opposed to these later fights that were a lot more of a slugfest that we saw. So stylistically, that whole weight category is going to be really interesting once we see once we move a little farther into it and we start seeing these differences in style being pitted against each other here. So we'll be looking forward to that one there. But like I said, this was we're still talking about Emmett Brennan and Yuka Smodley. So once they got into the second round, it was a much more mobile fight at that point in time. Smodley did with a bit more moving around and just a lot more circling and making more use of the ring. Now, Smodley had a last-second burst of energy, but that round still ended up being scored 10-9 in favor of the Irish fighter. And once we got into the third round, Smodley was still trying to put Brennan on the back foot, but having limited success. The Irishman in this one, every time Smodley was able to get him out to arm's length, he basically would just put up his guard and then just start inching back in, is closer and closer until he found his desired range, and then he would just unleash on him. So once again, unanimous decision going to the Irishman on that one here. We also saw Armenia's Gor Narasayan up against Luka Plantic of Croatia. Now, Gor came out swinging early with this in this fight, landing some really early jabs and looking like he was going to be controlling the pace of this for maybe about the first 5 seconds of this bout. And that's when the Croat changed the course of this fight. And looking for an early win, Plantic was just giving Narasayan no quarter whatsoever. As one boxer would back up, he wouldn't give him a breather, wouldn't give him an inch to move. And with the end result being a standing 8 count halfway through the first round, after the Armenian turned his back twice to the Croat, and the ultimate ending on this one being the ref calling this in the first round, stoppage by referee. In the women's featherweights, we had a chance to see Russians Ludmila Vorontsova up against Irma Testa of Italy. Now, Testa took this one in a unanimous decision. Both of them were quick out of the gate and wasting no time trading punches. But Testa used her reach here to her advantage, landing jabs at a rate of about 3-1 in the first round. Once we got into the second round, Vorontsova came out again looking to make up ground that she had lost during that first round, focusing on body shots, but with limited success here. So once we got into the third round, Vorontsova was trying to push the Italian onto the ropes, but paying a heavy price whenever she would get in close. So within about 10 seconds to go, Vorontsova needed to have her headgear readjusted. So that had put a stop to the fight and gave her a bit of a breather. But at the end of the day, it didn't really do her any good. So Vorontsova, who was the #1 seed in this weight class, lost this match, showing once again that there are no guarantees in this sport, and that seeding doesn't really do all that much for you at the end of the day. Sticking in the weight category, we saw Latvia's Amanda Milier against Croatia's Nikolina Kacic. Now, Malaire, this was a bit of a different one because Malaire was actually a former kickboxer, so you see that a bit in her footwork and in her style. And much of the first round was spent, though, in an attempt to kind of try to figure each other out, and both of them displaying a bit more footwork than their ability to punch. Kacic did take the first round on points, though. Now, Malaire did lose a point in the second round for not keeping her head up as she was bobbing and weaving, and but she did manage to take that second round, even despite it being docked that 1 point. With 3 points separating them coming into the third, Malaire was working to get inside Kacic's personal space and actively frustrating her at that point in time, with a good amount of success there. But ultimately, it just really wasn't enough to get past the Croatian at that point in time, with Nikolina Kacic taking this one on unanimous decision. We also saw Azerbaijan's Masati Hamazeva against Aiden Guldagi. There we go. So early trading in headshots here between the Turkish fighter and the Azerbaijani there, with Hamzaeva controlling the pace of the fight early on. But, by the end of the round, Guldagi was chasing Hamzaeva from one corner of the ring to the other, with the judges eventually scoring this one for Guldagi. both in the match and that particular round. Goldagi did spend most of the second round, though, in the center of the ring, while the Azerbaijani just spent most of it kind of circling around the outside here. And you basically saw Goldagi planted in the center, then kind of saying, come on, bring it to me here, and just kind of circling in the center here. Hemzeo, unfortunately, was kind of trying to rely on counterpunching here as we throughout the course of this, and it didn't do any favors, especially into the third, as Goldagi just refused to be drawn in and refused to chase her around the ring. So not letting her make any mistake, or refusing to take the time to make those mistakes, really didn't leave a lot of room for the counterpuncher on this one, with ultimately, again, this one going to Goldagi of Turkey in unanimous decision. Germany's Ornella Gabriel Warner lost to Romania's Maria Claudia Nechita. Early clinching and body shots to open up round one of this particular fight. Nechita scoring some early points, though she did slip, tripped over her own feet and hit the canvas there right at the end of the round. Not that it really affected her at that point in time. Into the second round, Warner was aggressive early on, landing a big right hand at the beginning of the round. And kind of, she was relying on, that classic peekaboo style throughout the course of this fight. And at least through the second, Nechita was clearly frustrated and was landing some questionable shots, including some on the back of the head. But, I mean, ultimately, her efforts were enough to get her through the round. So into round three, Warner landed a couple of stiff jabs just after the bell, but was clearly running out of steam and just couldn't summon the energy in order to stay aggressive enough to take Nechita in the third round, and ultimately losing this one. Nechita beating the number 4 seed in this tournament, Warner. In the women's lightweights, this one here, this is the last one we're talking about today, because this is where I ran out of time on this particular card before we had to come out here, because as I said, in the next room, I've still got this one playing. This, no matter between both these rings, my guess is this is going to be the fight of the day. And this was women's lightweight here, and it was Great Britain's Caroline Dubois against Finland's Mira Potkinen. So a couple of things to remember about this particular fight. Potkinen is a veteran of the sport. She was a medalist in 2016 at Rio, which was actually Finland's only medal at those particular games. And she is, again, a veteran of this sport. She's also 40 years old to Dubois' 20 years. So we've got a vast amount of experience difference here, not only an age gap. So Potkinen brought the fight to Dubois early. Effective punch picking from Dubois in the first half of the round, though, helped her out in a very big way, with one clinch sending Potkinen to the canvas, a second clinch sending both of them to the canvas, and a third clinch sending both of them to the canvas in this first round. So there was a lot of weird clinches going on. Now this isn't totally unheard of when you're pitting a orthodox fighter against a southpaw. They are going to come together a little bit differently, and that's how sometimes you can your legs will get tripped up during these clinches, because you both got the same foot forward on the same side, I should say. And that's what we saw here, and they spent a lot of time getting up off the canvas today. So round two, Potkinen was looking up to make some ground that she had lost in that first round, and a second stoppage was called in order to fix Dubois' headgear. There had been a stoppage at the beginning of the first round, at the end of the first round as well, just before the bell, to fix Dubois' headgear. Now, Potkinen was clearly throwing her weight around during this as well, during this match, and sending Dubois into the ropes whenever she could, and definitely leaning on her when she was in the ropes. And what you saw here, especially come round three, Dubois ended up being docked a point for holding, leaving only a point between them. Then only to have Potkinen dock a point 1 moment later, just for the same indiscretion, which really helped her out there. Because this one, at the end of the day, resembled more of a barroom scrap than it actually did an Olympic fight. And you saw Potkinen kind of using everything she had in her veterans playbook here. So holding with one arm while feeding body shots with the right, using her weight in a clinch to try to push her opponent into the ropes or to buy herself more time. I wouldn't go so far as to say she was fighting dirty, but she was definitely employing some tactics that live right on the very edge of the rule book. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it was not enough, and Caroline Dubois took this one on a unanimous decision, which was a big upset here. as we expected Mira Potkinen to do really well in this tournament and to kind of cruise through. Well, look, right up until she drew Dubois, we were thinking cruise through. But I wasn't sure which way this was going to go walking into this when I thought Dubois was going to have a bit more of an uphill battle. But she really kind of weathered the storm really well because, again, it wasn't a dirty fight, so to speak. But it was this far from being a dirty fight. And anyone who hasn't had a chance to get it to watch this one, definitely go take a look and go back and watch this one on the replays. Now, I see that Big T here has been watching a couple of the other matches there that were happening on, I think, on Ring B, which we didn't get a chance to report on for this particular one because they are running on 2 separate streams, both rings simultaneously at the moment. I'm not sure why, as opposed to just having sessions all day long, why they're running two concurrent sessions in a morning session and an afternoon. But that's the way that they're running this particular one. So hopefully we'll get a chance to see a few more of these fights as we get closer to it and we get down to 1 ring. We'll be able to bring you some more laser-focused reporting here. But that's what I've had a chance to watch so far this morning. And again, the big ones I'm looking forward to here. I'm looking forward to see what our friends in Great Britain are doing here. Because again, Dubois put out a hell of a match, and that was probably the fight of the day so far. And with a close second being probably Ben Whittaker's. And go back and watch that one as well if you haven't had a chance. And watch the way that he moves in a defensive style. Watch the way he bobs and weaves. Now he was given one warning in his fight about keeping his head above the belt line when he was bobbing and weaving. But at one point in time, it almost looked like he was having fun with this guy, with the Romanian there. And he had his back to the ropes, and he's just ducking and weaving, and he's not even throwing shots at this point. He's just letting the Aradui throw shots, and he's missing every one of them. He just couldn't figure it out. So once we get farther in, and we're going to see these guys who just want to stay planted and they're going to rely on their strength to try to just throw dump trucks all day against someone like Whittaker who is hard to hit. And also has for his weight class also has a fair reach on him as well. So I'm looking forward to see how both of those weight classes progress moving into this tournament.
Wow, that was an awesome recap.
It's only this much of it, though. It's only this much. Still, Ring A still going on. Ring B, I didn't even get a chance to touch on here. But yeah, there's lots of boxing happening, guys.
That's awesome. Great. And hopefully you've captured some imaginations out there. They're going to tune in now to, what is it, IOC.com?
No, it's Olympics.com.
Olympics.com.
Olympics.com, and then you'll have the option for whichever ring you'd like to watch, Ring A or Ring B. So if you've got 2 monitors, you're set. I had the big screen going, and I had my tablet going on the other one there, but we were only taking fight notes off Ring A this morning.
Right on. Okay. Well, it's
there we go. Actually, I just before we sign off here, I just noticed one of Big T's comments there regarding Ben's defensive style there, saying that it's more of a Cuban style of fighting as opposed to that traditional European. So maybe that might be the bobbing and weaving we're talking about there. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's great that you point that out as well, because I'm looking forward to as these matches elevate to square up against each other. But brilliant result, yes. So anyway, fantastic stuff. It's too bad you won't be online tomorrow. Tomorrow being the weekend for us, but the fights will go on, and I imagine they have a great recap for us on Monday. So until then, we'll see you tonight at 7 for the panel.
I'll be there.
You might be able to bring us up to speed a little bit at that panel.
We'll see. We'll see what we can find in the next hour or so here.
That's if Big Mikey will let you. All right.
Fair enough.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it. We'll see you tonight.